I'm Liam, 18, and this is what the priest did when we were alone. This is not the kind of story you expect to hear. I never thought my first confusing feelings would come from someone I was supposed to admire, someone I was taught to trust, even fear a little. But when I turned 18 and started questioning everything, my future, my beliefs, my body, I never imagined a single moment with a priest could twist something inside me so deeply. It started small, innocent even. But that night, when we were alone in the sacristy, something happened that still leaves me trembling every time I close my eyes. If you're someone who's ever felt conflicted by desire, guilt, or the people who were never supposed to cross that line, then this story will feel like your own reflection. Stay with me until the end, because what he did next, and what I chose to do after, changed everything I thought I knew about myself. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications if you want to keep following powerful stories like this. Trust me, this is just the beginning. My name is Liam. I had just turned 18 when everything in my world started to shift. You know that time in life when you think you're supposed to have all the answers, but inside you feel like you're made of glass? That was me. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, where the only church tower cast its shadow over everything else. It wasn't just a place for Sunday mornings. It was where we had weddings, funerals, confirmations, Christmas plays, and secrets too, apparently. Father Donovan had been our priest for as long as I could remember. He wasn't old, maybe 35 at most. Sharp jawline, kind eyes, voice like warm wind. People loved him. I did too, in that distant, respectful way. At least, I thought I did. That year, my mom had signed me up to help with the church's youth group, not because I was particularly religious, but because she thought it would build character. I went along with it because I didn't want to argue. And because, if I'm honest, part of me wanted to feel close to something. Or someone. That's how it started. Setting up chairs in the hall, organizing donation bins, lighting candles for evening mass. Harmless. But something in the air changed the first time Father Donovan asked me to stay after one evening. I remember it so clearly. "Can you help me sort the hymn books in the back?" he asked. Just the two of us. The sacristy was dimly lit, the overhead bulb flickering like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. He stood close to me as we stacked the worn books. Too close. His sleeve brushed mine every time he reached across the table, and every time it did, something inside me jumped. I tried to focus on the books, but my skin felt hot, my breath shallow. "You've grown up a lot lately," he said suddenly, his voice quiet. "You look different." I didn't know what to say. I gave a nervous laugh, tried to shrug it off like a joke. But he wasn't laughing. He was looking at me, really looking. Not the way a priest should look at a boy from his church. Not the way a grown man should look at someone who used to be a kid in his confirmation class. Something about his eyes made me forget where I was, made me forget how to think. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my silence. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." "Tired of what?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. That moment stretched longer than it should have. His hand brushed my forearm as he reached for another book. He didn't move it away right away, and I didn't pull back. Why didn't I? My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. Everything in me was screaming that this wasn't normal, wasn't right. And yet I stood there frozen in place, like some part of me wanted to know where this would go. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe I just wanted to feel wanted. Whatever it was, it made me stay. He cleared his throat, stepped back, and said, "Thanks for helping. You can go now." But something had already shifted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that look in his eyes, like I was something to be discovered, not someone to be guided. And worse than that, I didn't know if I hated it. The next day, I told myself I'd avoid him, that I was overthinking it. But when I walked into the church hall again, he was already there, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, watching me. And this time, he smiled. Not the usual polite smile. Something else. Something that made my stomach twist. Then he said 5 words I wasn't ready for. "Can you stay again tonight?" I hesitated. When Father Donovan asked if I could stay again that night, my mouth said sure, before my brain even caught up. I hated how easy it had become, how natural it felt to follow him, like gravity was stronger inside that church whenever he looked at me. I told myself it was just another task. Maybe folding robes, maybe organizing supplies. Nothing more. But the truth is, I didn't want it to be nothing. The church emptied out slowly after youth group, kids laughing, parents chatting, the sound of shoes on the old tile floor. He waited until the last voice faded before nodding toward the back. "In the sacristy again," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something in it. A slowness, a weight. Like we both knew this wasn't just about hymn books anymore. When I walked in, the room was exactly the same. Low light, faint scent of incense. Silence so thick it pressed against my skin. He followed me in and closed the door behind us. That sound, soft but final, echoed in my chest like a warning bell. I didn't dare look back. "I want to talk," he said, pulling out one of the small wooden chairs. "Sit down, Liam." So I did. He sat across from me, elbows on knees, eyes searching mine like he was peeling away my layers. "I've noticed something in you lately," he began. "Not just the way you look, but the way you feel when you walk into a room." I swallowed. "What do you mean?" "You carry something with you," he said slowly. "A question, maybe, or a hunger you're trying to hide." My throat tightened. He wasn't wrong, but hearing it out loud felt like being stripped bare. "You don't have to be afraid of it," he continued. "Whatever you're carrying." I looked at the floor. I don't know what I'm carrying. "Don't you?" he asked, leaning forward. And for the first time I looked at him without the filter of who he was supposed to be. Not the priest, not the authority figure. Just a man. A man who made my stomach twist and my chest feel like it might split open. "You're scared of wanting something," he said, almost like it was an answer, not a question. I nodded slowly. Then he said, "So am I." That cracked something in me. The certainty I had about being the only one feeling this, it dissolved. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He didn't answer right away. He stood up instead, walked over to the tall cabinet in the corner, and opened it. From the top shelf, he pulled out a small, folded cloth. He came back and draped it gently over the table between us. "I'm not supposed to say," he said with a bitter smile. "But I want to be honest." The air between us pulsed with something too big to name. We sat in silence, staring at each other. My heartbeat was in my ears again. And then he reached out, not for my hand, not for my face, but for a silver chain around his own neck. He took it off and placed it on the cloth between us. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said. "All that confusion, all that ache." I could barely speak. "What did you do with it?" He looked at me. "I buried it. For years." The chain sat there like a symbol, not just of his faith, but of everything he'd been hiding, and maybe everything he was offering now. 1,000 questions pressed against my lips. What does this mean? What does he want from me? What do I want from him? But before I could ask any of them, he stood and walked behind me. I heard his footsteps, slow and deliberate, stopping just a few inches from where I sat. I could feel his presence, the heat of his breath near the back of my neck. My whole body tensed. And then, without a word, his hand touched my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. I just sat there, frozen, as he leaned down and whispered, "You don't have to pretend anymore." His hand was still on my shoulder. Just the weight of it, steady, calm, felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't wrong. And yet, it carried more meaning than anything I'd ever felt before. "You don't have to pretend anymore," he had whispered. And those words, they stuck. Not just in my ears, but in my chest, like something had finally been unlocked. I sat there, unmoving, letting the silence wrap around us. His fingers shifted slightly, brushing against the side of my neck. Deliberate, slow. I sucked in a breath. I think he was waiting for me to pull away, to say no, but I didn't. I turned around instead, slowly, deliberately, until I was facing him. He looked at me, eyes heavy with emotion I couldn't read. Was it guilt? Hunger? Both? I didn't know. I just knew that something in that moment stopped pretending. For the first time in my life, I saw the look of someone wanting me, really wanting me, and not hiding it. "I've thought about this," he said, voice low. "More than I should." I nodded. My mouth was dry. "Me too." His eyes flickered in surprise. Maybe he hadn't expected me to say it. Maybe he still saw me as the boy from Sunday school, not the 18-year-old who couldn't sleep at night because of how confused he felt. "I'm not supposed to want this," he admitted. "Neither am I," I said. We were both breaking something. An invisible rule, a wall, a fear. It felt terrifying and real. Then, slowly, he sat down in front of me again. "If I've misread you, if this is something you don't want—" "I wouldn't be here if I didn't," I cut in. That was the truth. As confusing as it all was, I wasn't there out of obligation. I came back because part of me wanted to, needed to. His eyes softened and the silence returned. But this time it felt heavier, like the air between us had changed permanently. And then it happened. He reached out and touched my hand. It was gentle, just his fingertips grazing mine. But my whole body reacted like I'd been struck by lightning. Not out of fear, but something else. Something deeper. Something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. I closed my fingers around his. We sat there, hand in hand, not speaking. I felt like if I said anything, the spell would break. That maybe he'd remember he was a priest. That I'd remember I wasn't supposed to fall for someone like him. But in that moment, all I felt was how right it seemed. Until the door creaked open. I jumped. He let go of my hand immediately. A voice called from the hallway. Distant, but recognizable. It was James, the old man who cleaned the church on Thursdays. "Father Donovan? You still here?" Panic flickered across the priest's face. "Yeah," he called back, quickly standing. "Just wrapping up with one of the volunteers." I stood too, pulse racing, heart pounding against my ribs. Everything in me screamed that this had gone too far, that we'd crossed a line neither of us could uncross. He turned back to me, jaw tense. "Come back tomorrow night." It wasn't a question. I hesitated. "Are you sure?" He stepped closer. I've never been more unsure of anything. And yet, I want to see you again." I nodded. The rest of the night passed like a blur. I went home and avoided my mom's questions about where I'd been. I stared at my ceiling for hours, wondering what would have happened if that door hadn't opened. The next day at school, I couldn't focus. My body was in class, but my mind was still in that sacristy, still feeling the warmth of his hand, still hearing his voice say, "You don't have to pretend anymore." When the sun set, I went back. I told myself I was just going to talk, just going to clear things up. But I knew that was a lie. When I entered the back hallway of the church, the lights were already dimmed. The door to the sacristy was ajar. I pushed it open and froze. He was inside, not in his collar, not in his robe, but in a tight black shirt, sleeves rolled up, eyes locked on mine. He stepped forward, closing the door behind me again. But this time, he didn't say a word. He reached out, and this time, he touched my face. His hand on my face didn't feel like a sin. It felt like surrender, the kind that makes your knees weak, that makes you forget where you are, who you're supposed to be. I stood there, barely breathing, as his thumb moved along my cheekbone in a slow, careful motion, like he was tracing the shape of something he'd dreamed of but never dared to touch. Neither of us spoke. The quiet between us was louder than any words could have been, but then I saw it in his eyes, that flicker of fear. He stepped back. "I shouldn't," he said, his voice tight. "Liam, I can't be this for you." My heart dropped, not because I didn't understand, but because I did. He was terrified, and so was I, but I still stepped toward him. "I don't know what this is," I said, "but I know I don't want to walk away from it without knowing where it could go." His mouth parted slightly like he wanted to answer, but couldn't. His hand hovered in the air between us, uncertain, like he was still choosing. "I want you to be honest," I added. "If you don't feel what I feel, tell me now. I'll leave." He closed his eyes. "I feel it," he finally admitted. "Too much." That word, too, stung. But he continued. "You make me remember parts of myself I buried years ago. I thought I'd buried them forever." I nodded, throat tight. Then maybe they weren't dead. Just waiting. We stood like that for a long moment, emotion rippling between us like tension before a storm. I knew he was about to say something big, when the front door of the church slammed open. A woman's voice echoed through the empty halls. "Father Donovan, are you in here?" We both froze. It was Mrs. Andrews, the town mayor's wife, and also his biggest supporter. Her heels clicked down the hallway, getting closer with every second. He grabbed my wrist gently. "In here," he whispered, opening the door to a narrow storage closet. "Just for a moment." I stepped inside, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear. He closed the door softly behind me, just before the main door creaked open again. "Oh, hello," she said brightly. "I thought I saw your car." "Yes," he replied, voice steady. "Just finishing up some organizing." "You always work too late," she chuckled. "I brought the new donation forms you asked for." From the crack in the closet door, I could see him smiling politely, taking the envelope. He was calm, perfectly composed, and I was in the dark, hidden, a secret. That realization burned through me harder than I expected. Was that all I was going to be? Mrs. Andrews eventually left with a hug and a cheerful, "Good night, Father." We both listened to her footsteps fade into silence. When the door finally opened again, he looked at me, and something in his face had changed. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. I didn't mean for you to feel like that. Like what? I asked. Like you don't belong out there. Like you're something to be hidden. I didn't answer. He stepped closer, resting his forehead against mine. I've spent years keeping myself locked up. But you make me want to open something I've buried too long. Then he kissed me, soft, quick, barely there. But it landed like a confession. I froze, not because I didn't want it, but because it was real. We'd crossed the line, the point of no return, and I think we both knew it. When he pulled back, neither of us spoke, but then the sharp sound of a knock echoed through the church again. Not a soft knock, not polite, a loud, firm knock, followed by another. He looked at me, his eyes wide. We weren't supposed to be here, not like this, not together. He whispered, "Stay quiet." I turned toward the door, pulse racing, because on the other side, someone had come looking. The door didn't open, but the knocks kept coming, louder now, like whoever was out there had no intention of leaving. Father Donovan turned to me, his eyes full of panic. Then, just as suddenly, the knocking stopped. Silence. We stood frozen. Minutes passed. He walked out slowly, glanced down the hall, and came back pale. "Someone saw us," he said quietly. "I don't know who." I sat down, my legs finally giving out. "So what happens now?" He sat beside me. "Now I have to make a choice." I turned to him, heart pounding. "And me?" He took my hand again. "You already made yours." The church was empty the next day. No sermon, no choir, just a note on the front door. Father Donovan is on leave indefinitely. He left without a goodbye. I waited for a message, a call, anything. Weeks passed. And then, one night, I found a letter in my mailbox. No name, no return address. Just one page. "I never wanted to hurt you, but the truth is, you helped me find the part of myself I thought I had lost forever. If I never see you again, I hope you know that what we had was real. I'll carry it with me always." I folded the letter and sat down on the porch. I didn't cry, because even though he was gone, I had found something I never had before. Clarity. About who I am, about what I deserve, and about the kind of love I'm no longer afraid to feel. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? Someone who forced you to look at yourself differently, even if it hurt? This story isn't about blame. It's about awakening, about what it means to want and to be wanted, even when the world says you shouldn't. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? If this story touched something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because the next story might be yours. Thanks for watching.